Let's keep trucking, guys, and we're going to head into our third set of video notes for Unit 10. So this is the humanistic perspective of personality. So again, you're going to see me kind of emphasizing some of the theories of some specific individuals who contributed a great deal to this ideology. So we are going to spend an awful lot of our focus taking a look at Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers for this humanistic assessment of personality. So for the humanists, they're going to start to pop up in the 1960s. And if you kind of think of it in terms of the fact that they sound kind of hippie-ish as we move forward, we even got a little indication of that in the slides moving forward, it'll make it a little bit easier to understand what their main overarching theme is, regardless of their theories on how we attain those pieces. But they didn't really like the negativity that was present in Freud's theories. The reality is Freud's pretty creepy. He's looking at an awful lot of unpleasant aspects to the supposed unconscious mind that is out there. And then they, obviously we follow that, if you go all the way back to Unit 1 with our history to psychology. It's the behaviorists that are going to pop up after Freud. And they were very, mechanical, that everything is just learned via reward or punishment, reward or punishment, reward or punishment. And so the humanists felt that was a little bit too stark or black and white to things. They just didn't like how simplistic that was. And so for humanists, their overarching emphasis is that you control your own actions. The world doesn't. The situation doesn't. Your genetics don't. You do. You control what happens to you, okay? It's a much more positive view of human nature. They believe, for example, that we are all innately good and driven to do good things and be our best selves. And so part of what makes it kind of easy to remember that the humanists are pretty hippie-ish in regards to their thought processes is they come out of the 1960s. And if you think about the hippie movement and how it's all about learning to love yourself and to love others as they are and be accepting of all people, it's a very person-centered theory or perspective. And so it was really, really, really popular in the 1960s, and it's going to find its way into being the backbone of an awful lot of things currently, even though it's been, 50 plus years since these things have come out. So let's talk about Maslow and his theory of the hierarchy of needs. I'm going to touch on this very quickly, only because I have already elaborated on what all is involved in it with you in Unit 8 when we covered motivation, emotion, and stress. So if you remember, just in brief, Maslow believed that self-actualization is our overarching goal. We want to reach our unique potential. We want to fulfill our own level of personal growth, okay? And so we all need certain needs that have to be met in a particular order in order to achieve that self-actualized point. So at the bottom is biological and physiological needs, followed by safety needs, followed by belongingness and love, also known as social needs. Then above that is esteem, and then finally you reach self-actualization. You move up the hierarchy from the bottom. Your basic needs are at that level, and then you go up towards the top, which is that self-actualized point. Now, let's take a look at how it is that we try to reach self-actualization, okay? Maslow believed that our desire to reach that full level of our potential is often thwarted by our environment. So situations, life experiences, they prevent us from reaching our full potential. So he felt that a self-actualized individual demonstrated some of the following characteristics, okay? Because he truly felt that we do all try to reach that actualized point. It's just not all of us are able to achieve it, okay? So one who is self-actualizing is accepting of themselves unconditionally, okay? So they are lovable, wonderful, amazing, regardless of their flaws and imperfections and problems. They are spontaneous and natural. They're not a calculated person who is always plotting out every single thing and every single action they make. They have a democratic nature in the sense that they perceive that everybody deserves to be included. Everybody deserves to have a say. Self-actualized people like privacy. They don't feel the necessity to, put all of their news out there to an awful lot of people to be praised. Oftentimes they operate on a sense of humility. So in that regard, many of us wouldn't exactly be self-actualized based off of Maslow's theory, because Far too many of us attempt to make ourselves feel better by posting all of our life experiences out on social media and getting as many likes as we possibly can, right? He felt self-actualized people focus on problems outside of themselves, so they weren't solely worried about their own life situation. They were worried about other people's as well. They have strong senses of ethics and morals. They have a very close number of friends, but a very limited number. So they're not one of those people that seems to be, besties with virtually everybody. And ultimately, they're realistic individuals. They know that there are certain things that they can attain, and they know there are certain things that they cannot. And so they recognize those aspects within themselves. Now, if we move on to the other theorist we need to talk about, that is Carl Rogers. He also is very big on self-actualization, but it's a little bit different. His focus to reach self-actualization is via the concept of the self, okay? How you perceive your abilities, your behaviors, your characteristics. And so that was ultimately his key area of focus, okay? So you have personal growth that, and every one of us have the capacity to reach that level for ourselves. People are naturally good, but for him, your central feature to your personality is how you perceive yourself, okay? That self-concept and what it is. So for an individual to be fully functioning, I got a little typo on here, my apologies on that, which is ultimately what he felt was necessary to be self-actualized. You're not capable of being self-actualized unless you are fully functioning, which means you have harmony between how you see yourself and the person that you portray to other individuals. That's when you are fully self-actualized. What are involved in those pieces, those components, okay? First, you have to have genuineness. You have to be open with your feelings, and you cannot just put up various different masks, if you will, to hide how you truly end up feeling about situations or people or even yourself, okay? Acceptance. That means you have to get rid of something that he called conditions of worth. These things that you perceive that have to be met in order for you to be loved, important, cared about by other people in your life or by society, okay? And you have to have unconditional positive regard. This recognition that you and others are wonderful, amazing people regardless of your flaws. You have to have that for yourself, and you have to have that for other people in your life. Okay, so those are very, very, very important pieces. It's not just you, it's other people in your life as well. You can't hold people to conditions of worth in your life if they are not expected to hold those over you as well, right? And then the third piece you have to have is empathy. So you have to be capable of placing yourself into another person's shoes, seeing things from their perspective, understanding their point of view. That's how you become self-actualized, okay? So how would Rogers then attempt to go about assessing some of these pieces in our personalities? Basically what he did was he asked people to describe themselves as they would like to be, which is ultimately their ideal self. So if you could be anything, what could it be, or what would it be? And then he asked them how they saw themselves at that moment. That was their real self, okay? Here's the deal. If those two answers were connected with one another, if they were the same, he felt that you were fully functioning and you were therefore self-actualized. If, however, they were not aligned, okay, if they were kind of incongruous and separate from one another, very different, there was that gap between the I should and I am descriptions, you are not fully functioning. You are not going to become self-actualized unless you go back and work on these three elements here of genuineness, acceptance, and empathy, okay? So, to wrap up all of this, we're going to see if I can do it in under 10 minutes. That'll be a big lofty goal for me, won't it? We all know I love to chat. Here's the thing with humanism. It sounds great. And many, 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 many areas of our society have been impacted by that. Counseling, education, child rearing practices, even management concepts about, encouraging you to reach your full potential in terms of growth and accepting yourself as you are. Problem is, these are really vague concepts and super subjective. How do you know one person is self-actualized over another? And how do you scientifically measure self-actualization? Because, to see this difference in a gap between your ideal self and your real self, that's just not scientific in any way. And to some extent, the individualistic aspect of this can kind of lend itself towards some self-indulgence and selfishness. That, you know, all that matters is you and your happiness with your life and where you are, and you know, that you be accepted and loved as you are. So you need to be really careful with that level of emphasis attached to it too, because there are some that feel that that can lend itself toward some not very positive behaviors in a person when it comes to their personality structure. So that's the end of this unit. Let me know, or well, it's not the end of this unit, it's the end of this lecture in this unit. Let me know if you got any questions.